Hello, everybody, and welcome to This is Surveying. I'm your host, Nina Young, and today on the show is Suzanne Hill. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me along.
To introduce Suzanne, Suzanne is the business strategist for AI and the founder of AI for SMEs. She's also an amazing keynote speaker and has been on some incredible stages. Some of them notable was one for eBay and another one was for Construction Live. And you're an amazing speaker, Suzanne. So as always, we do at the start of the show, want to learn really a bit about you for the listeners, Suzanne. So tell us a bit more about yourself.
Okay, so I currently work in AI. I set up an AI company a year and a half ago, but my background's actually in construction. Was my first introduction to the construction sector was about maybe 26 years ago, and I was working for a Northern Ireland company, Brett Martin. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that company. I was their export salesperson, and I was out in North and South America selling roofing products from everywhere from Canada right down to Chile.
Wow.
So it was a great introduction to the construction sector in a continent where every market's different. Since then, I suppose that's what really sparked my love of the construction sector. I really like working in it. It's something very tangible. I think because you're building buildings and you're constructing things, it just makes it so exciting when you see everything coming together. So about 4 years ago, I think I suppose I'm fascinated by all things innovation, and I've had my own strategy consultancy for 23 years, and I've been reading about AI for maybe about 7 years. But then about 4 years ago, I happened to be reading this article one day, and a penny dropped with me, and I thought, oh my goodness, if I don't upskill and really get to grips with this, then I'm not going to have a job in 5 years' time. I'm not going to be in a position where I'm able to keep my clients ahead of the curves. And then I signed up to do a course at UCD, University College Dublin, in AI for Business. So that was a bit of a baptism of fire, because I was coming at it entirely from a non-technical background, and in this class full of techies, of people who were working in the technology department of banks and all the multinationals that are headquartered in Dublin. And there was a conversation taking place in the class about machine learning and neural networks and all this kind of stuff. And I was sitting there thinking, I am never going to get my head around this, and I'm in the wrong place totally. But then kind of as the weeks went on, we started to discuss, the business elements of it and strategy. And I thought, oh, hang on a minute. So I actually really get this, So I was just hooked when I realized how it could impact companies, how it could impact industries. And so when I graduated from that course, went straight on and did another advanced AI for business, a diploma, and that was kind of the start of maybe 14 or 15 courses I've done now at this stage.
Oh, really? Wow.
But that just the intersection between construction and how AI impacts it is really, I suppose, my area of specialisation. Through my strategy consultancy, I've probably worked with maybe somewhere between like 250 and 300 construction companies, not just in the UK and Ireland, but internationally as well. So
you've got all those established relationships, haven't you?
Yeah.
And so then you've gone to understand in-depth AI, and then you've kind of put the two together.
I think when you actually understand the internal workings of a construction company, and then you're looking at AI and understanding it from that perspective, and how it's going to impact them both internally in terms of how they run their business and what their business model looks like and their value streams, but then also, I suppose, horizon scanning what's happening in the wider market and looking for signals or early signals of what way the market's going to go, and then kind of preparing your clients accordingly so that they're prepared for what's coming down the line. Because
I see.
I think, we've had this conversation many times about how companies really approach. I think in the last couple of years, people have been tinkering with AI, and they're dabbling, and they're maybe using it for personal productivity within their company. But at company level, I don't see a lot of strategy going on or harnessing that the capabilities of AI at a company level. Everybody's kind of working individually or even at a department level, but it's siloed still. So I think that 2026 is going to be a real watershed moment for AI in the industry.
I think, sure, you're very much in the construction space, and I'm more in the kind of the profession of surveying, and I'm seeing exactly the same thing. There is a lot that even are just starting to tinker with the tools, and employees are using it, whether even if the employee doesn't know, they probably don't even have an AI policy. But from an actual firm level, I don't see much conversations or talk or even firms looking at this from strategic, and that's very much where you come from, isn't it? From a
Yes.
strategy level with AI. Can you explain what that is and kind of how, and the importance of looking at AI from that angle?
So obviously with AI, I think there's a lot of focus at the minute on the technology element of it. And of course, that's an important part, but it's about 20% of the picture. The other 80% is really strategy, people, workflows, processes. So I think there tends to be this over focus on the technology. And I think what companies haven't really understood yet is that AI is going to fundamentally impact the entire construction ecosystem that we're all working in at the minute, where the value sits in that. And if you rush down the route of implementing technology without being really clear on your strategy and your business model, and I mean your business strategy, not your strategy for the technology. And I think there's probably, when you see people describing themselves as an AI strategist, to me, most of the time that means it's about the technology. And the most important part for companies is looking at what is their business strategy for AI. And there's a fundamental difference there, because what you're really talking about is what their business model is going to be in future. If you think about it from that perspective, then you need to be thinking about, well, how does our business model change in the future? So if you're approaching it from a technology perspective, all you're doing is accelerating your legacy business model. Who are we going to be in 2 years' time?
Yeah,
Because in
she
actual
did that very
fact,
well.
that's what everybody needs to emulate. So it's like, what are we going to look like in another 2 years' time? And it's going to be completely different. So yes, I don't think companies have quite got their head around that yet.
I think that it's difficult, isn't it? Because there is so much like misinformation, confusion. There is hype. There's a lot of people, these shiny new tools, getting distracted, getting overwhelmed. And I think because this is pervasive, but it's global and it's impacting not just work, but personal lives, it's everywhere. And it's just gradually appearing in everything we use already and this kind of thing. I think, and also the level of change with it, it's just so rapid that keeping on top of it is almost impossible. And then it's having that foresight and to dedicate that time to looking ahead to imagine not just your firm and how that's going to work or your business, but what is everyone else doing around it? Because in an example I see a lot is where clients are uploading their survey reports into a chat GPT, which is not secure. And it's like understanding, and that the fact that even if you don't understand it or you're not making any effort, there's a lot of skepticism and I don't want to know. I think a lot of people, and I don't know if you see that within construction, they're not interested. Clients will still be using it. It's like you can't avoid it, but looking ahead to see how the whole environment is going to change, I think it's quite daunting for people, I think.
It is. And I think if you take sort of the average company in anywhere in the construction sector with the skills shortages that there are, everybody is flat to the mat all the time. The companies never have enough people and everybody's stretched. And then somebody comes along and says, well, you've really got to be thinking about your AI strategy. It's just like another hand grenade into the middle of, and they're wrestling with that increased costs, increasing compliance, SG. It's not, working in construction is not it's not an easy career. You've got a lot of things that you have to think about, and there's not a lot of head space to kind of take a step back and to be thinking about some of this stuff. And then when you think about it and you think, well, we're certainly not bringing this in a live project because we've got a formula, we know what works. And I think the fact that margins are so small as well, one failed project can pull a company under, really. So I think that there's an element of of sequencing, and I think that that also comes into your strategy. You can't afford to be investing time and effort and money into technology, which is fundamentally going to be, archaic after a year. So
Absolutely.
it's so getting all of that right, and yes, there are certain tools that you could bring in, like bid management tools, or maybe speeding up the admin around your compliance, or just simple things, estimating tools that you can bring in that are not going to fundamentally change the backbone technology of how you run your company. So, of course, those are operational things that you can bring in to alleviate workload for people, which frees
Mm.
up their time to give them a bit of headspace so that they're thinking, now I have headspace to think strategically about where does this department go, or where does our company go in the future. So I think the two have to run concurrently, but it's you've got this balance between optimization and optionality. So
Okay.
optimization is optimizing your processes and getting insights from your data, but you don't want to go too far down that road that you're closing off your options by saying, right, we're going to go all in on using this one particular platform, because you might tie yourself up with that company. You might be so embedded with them. At the minute, I suppose strategically, business leaders need to be asking themselves, well, if we bring this technology in now, in another 12 months, how easy is it for us to extract ourselves from that?
Right.
And being the need to be keeping our options open till we see a bit more about how the wider landscape's going to pan out.
I think you've hit the nail on the head with that kind of thing, though. It's like being savvy, risk aware of these. What I hear a lot of is, asking, well, how do I know what software to use? How do I know what
Hmm.
what technology to use?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of sadly, there's a lot of software companies and things that are going, all these shiny tools, AI this and AI that, and like you're right, and they get swept up in it, thinking, no, it's going to save us all this time, it's going to, make everything efficient. But like you say, once they get tied in, but the other
Hmm.
side of it is where the technology is improving and changing all the time. Like there's some things that
Exactly.
we've been using 3 years ago that are rubbish now.
Yeah.
Like they jumped in and, we like magpies, we got drawn in, didn't we? But I think that is the biggest concern, is that it is really hard to step back and have that mindset to look at something that is, for many, is quite alien, I think.
I think, when I'm explaining about AI to people, I say, look, I use this analogy of a car, and I say, look, say, for example, you want to drive from London to Manchester. So go into Manchester's like your business objective. And the route or that you take to get there is like your strategy or process. And the AI tool's like the car. So the AI
Right.
tool is just an enabler. It's just a means of getting you from one place to another, or helping you to achieve your business objective. So, but the most important part of all of that is the driver of the car, because they're the
Mm.
one deciding what's the business objective, what's the strategy. They're adjusting the route according to internal or external circumstances, but they are the most important part of the entire picture. It's their judgment that's important in the whole thing.
I'm going to have
And
to nick this.
I know, right? And then the fuel for the car is like your data. So it has to be in sufficient quantity and of sufficient quality to power you to your destination. And then
Okay.
I think that one of the big problems with a lot of the information that's out there in the market at the minute is, like, you've got all these mechanics who are the techies, and they're running around trying to explain to people how the engine of the car works, which it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It just matters that how to drive. So it's
Mm.
always start with the strategy first. What are we trying to achieve as a company? What's our strategy for achieving that objective? What are the challenges that we have as a business, or where are the bottlenecks, or where are our processes really admin heavy? And just when you're clear on all of that, it's at that point then that you go and look for an AI tool that helps you to solve that challenge or alleviate the bottleneck. But if you start with the tool first and then try to make it fit your business, you're going
Mm.
to end up with a whole lot of orphan tools that nobody uses, and you'll have wasted a lot of money. And
What's What's your thought on something that I use, the AI tools? I actually use it to help me with strategy myself.
Hmm.
So strategic directions, question my thinking. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts on that kind of thing to help sort of, I'm looking at it from sort of obviously your construction, but surveyors as well. And because I think getting the mindset around it, a lot of people struggle
Hmm.
with strategy.
Yeah.
And can you use these tools to help in that first instance before, because that's a different thing, isn't it?
Well, yes, you can definitely, and brainstorming with tools like ChatGPT or whatever it might be. That's a really good place to start. I think though it's also understanding strategy itself.
Okay.
Because I have worked with companies where maybe their senior leadership team has had an away day or a strategy day, and they come back with this document, and they've showed me it, and they say this is our strategy, these are the outworkings of our away day, and it's entirely operational stuff. So
Okay.
it's about also being able to discern what is strategy for our company. And
Yeah.
and it's actually quite surprising that a lot of people who are in that kind of position maybe might not be strategic thinkers. You might get one or two, but not everybody's a strategic thinker. So if you think of the impact of AI like a game of chess, there's an awful lot of people playing tiddlywinks at the minute. And they're not thinking about it from a really high strategic perspective of what is our game plan? And if the whole playing field of construction that we operate in changes, what game are we in as a company? And how do we plan to win that game?
That's a
And
really good point. Yeah.
it's that they're not thinking about. So I haven't
That
met
plan to
anybody
win.
yet
Yeah.
of who's thinking about it from that perspective. Most companies are just being, I would say, like just optimizing their current business model.
So that's your experience with clients that you've worked with. That
Yeah,
tends to be the case.
yeah,
You said something earlier before we started, which was around spend a lot of time trying to sort of undo people's misunderstandings.
yeah. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around AI, and I'll be running these one-day workshops for senior teams on company boards, and half the battle is getting them to unlearn some of the nonsense that they picked up online. And there's an awful lot of nonsense spoken about on different forums, and I think as well on LinkedIn. I'm sure you've noticed it as well. Like there's more and more AI generated posts
Yeah.
and also comments as well. You can tell whoever has posted it really doesn't know what they're talking about at all. And then people read that and they think that that's AI gospel, and that's their interpretation of it. And then you get into these whole discussions, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, but that's actually not the case. So
Yeah.
getting people to unlearn a lot of the misconceptions is kind of half the battle with
I
any of
think
these
it, I
discussions.
think, and that kind of thing doesn't help either, because then people are just, because I think I'm seeing some of that where people are just fed up of AI because they see fake images, fake comments across social media and things, and they just think it's bad, it's rubbish, don't like it. So they just
Hmm.
shut down. So I'm not interested in it. So I think it's also a lot of people will be really, really late adopters, which is understandable. But I think a lot of people also, because of the negatives of AI that
Hmm.
has been seen and people shout about, people are like, all right, it's rubbish. I don't want it. They used it once a few years back and it didn't work. And then so they ignore it. And I
Hmm.
think that's a worry I have in that. I think there's natural skepticism a lot across construction surveying, and understandably, but at the same time, there's a lot of noise and misinterpretation. People saying it's rubbish. You've seen surveyors go, ChatGPT just hallucinates. Know for a fact that it was rubbish. So what. And they
Hmm.
believe it. And
Hmm.
that's,
Yeah. And I mean, I can understand the AI fatigue because, to be honest,
mm,
sometimes you go online or you, you open up something like LinkedIn and every post nearly is about AI. And you think, oh, no, please. When you just come off it again, and I work in AI and I really love it, and you find the whole thing really exciting. But sometimes it's just like, whoa, can we not talk about normal things as well? There are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of false information out there. There's a lot of people in the training space and in the consultancy space as well that have they've tinkered about with ChatGPT, and then they've set themselves up as a trainer without any concept of ethics or compliance or governance or cybersecurity. And I think that's one of the things about AI, that you have to understand it from so many different facets. there's no one person has all the answers. I don't have all the answers. My specialization is business model, revenue streams, the bit around the people and the organizational transformation and what's the impact that's going to have on your workforce and all that type of thing. But I mean, once you start to get into the specifics of all the different facets, you need people who have domain knowledge plus AI knowledge. And I think that that's the big differentiator. That's why I specialize in the construction sector, because I have the domain knowledge plus the AI knowledge. So, you can't just, maybe you can launch yourself as an AI trainer teaching people how to prompt, but beyond that, unless you have an understanding of all those other domains on a long track record behind you, then I just think you have a real believability and credibility issue. So,
Yeah.
but from a company perspective, it's very difficult for people to, I think, to discern who's credible and who isn't, because again, we can pick up on it because we're very embedded in using AI and I'm very familiar with all the different facets of it. But to the uninitiated, you might see an AI generated post and you just think, oh, well, that person sounds like, they know what they're talking about. Let's bring them in, and then all hell breaks loose and you end up spending
Yeah.
money in the wrong place. But again, there's huge risk factors even before you buy the AI tools themselves. It's making the decision about which AI tools to use, because you want to make sure that they're powering your future and not actually just optimizing your past. So
Yes.
I think
I
that's
think
a
there's so many
difficult.
different layers,
There are.
isn't
There are.
there? There are. And a lot of what I try and do is just kind of inform, share, sort of spread awareness, get professionals to just start to understand it and explore it, because there's so much change coming.
Hmm.
And like you, a few years back, I thought something huge is going to impact everything. And I started to talk about it. And I think you're right with 2026 really being the year where people
Hmm.
not just dabble, but they really now have to get more of an understanding and step back and look at their business as a whole strategic thing. But I think, like you say, I think most people don't think like that anyway, that run businesses have the
Yeah.
strategy, the mindset. I think that's, so you started with that challenge in the first
Yeah.
place.
I think that, as we said earlier, 24, 25 was all about the experimentation phase and running a few pilots and whatnot. And now I think we're into a 2-year period where companies have to definitively make a decision about their future strategy. And it's vital that they do that in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Because by 2028, people will have to make a decision about, okay, which backbone platform are we going to use? Because after that, then you'll be more or less locked into it. And to change away from that main platform is going to be extremely expensive and extremely difficult. So, and I think to a degree in construction that might be decided for you by the clients that you're working with. One of the scenarios that I see is that AI doesn't just capacitate your company, it's also capacitating your clients.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you can get this displacement of the function that your company performs because your clients have access to the same AI tools as you, and now they've decided to do it for themselves. So rather than hire you as a company, maybe they get an extra person in-house. That extra person in-house plus the AI tools means that they don't need you to do anything for them, which is why you need to be thinking about, well, if we can no longer charge for that service, what other services should we be thinking about right now that we need to build up expertise in and change our business model accordingly, so that in 2 years' time, when the client phases us out for this part of our business, that we actually have other revenue streams. And that is what I mean by the importance of the strategy. It's thinking ahead. Where could clients displace us? You're going to get pressure coming at you from all directions, companies that are bigger than you.
That's actually, Suzanne, brings me to mind about what we mentioned before the call, was some examples of what's happening within construction, disruptive. And I think you mentioned AECOM. Could you tell us a little bit more about that scenario
Yeah.
or
So
situation?
I think that some of the things that's happening at a really high level in the marketplace of these global companies, and if you look at the case of AECOM, where they bought over a Norwegian AI company, an AI engineering platform, and have decided to actually buy that over and embed it into their company. And I think that so AECOM's 16 billion turnover company with, I think, 51,000 employees. And their CEO is quoted as saying, "We saw AI as an existential risk, that if one of our competitors embedded AI capability, could put us out of business entirely." And they're 16 billion turnover company. So if they're looking at AI and thinking this could put our lights out, it shows that nobody's immune to it.
Very forward thinking of them. And it's not a small thing because they're huge and the infrastructure change they have to make because of it.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see how actually buying over the platform, embedding it into the very fabric of the services that they offer, so that rather than it changes the entire procurement picture. It means that they can offer guarantees and around program and risk and carbon footprint and the whole 9 yards. They can offer that upfront. So if you're coming with a traditional tendering model, you're not playing the same game, so there's that impact. And thinking ahead, well, if that happened, if somebody that we compete against bought over a company, or they did some kind of tie up with an AI technology or tool producer, how would that impact our business model? What would the existential threats look like to our company? So it's all that type of stuff that I would be working on with my clients, looking at future business models. Where are the risks coming from? Where are the opportunities? And there are a lot of the companies I work with are kind of mid-sized, let's say mid-sized companies, and they could find themselves under pressure even from tier ones. So if you're sitting in your tier two company, you could find yourself under pressure from tier ones because they've optimized their business model to such an extent that now, rather than bidding for the £100 million plus projects, now a £50 million project is viable
Right.
for them. So they might start encroaching further down because they're able to do higher volume of projects. You
Right.
might get this client disintermediation where the client decides, well, actually, we can do that part of that job in-house. So you might find a scenario in future where you don't even need main contractors.
Right. That's a real concern because that's inevitable, isn't it? It's going to have a huge impact, huge shift.
I think also one of the interesting scenarios in the market is this the Procore scenario, where they've just bought over this San Francisco AI startup, DataGrid. And what DataGrid can do, from what I have read, is that they're basically going to solve the fundamental issue in construction, which is that everybody's working off all these legacy IT systems. They're all siloed. None of them talk to each other. I think on average, construction companies are working with 11 different IT systems. So DataGrid, you don't even have to be a Procore customer to get access to DataGrid. And what it does is it sits like a layer above all these disparate systems and pulls the information from each of them and adds this AI functionality. To me, that's an absolute game changer. And I think because it's also technology agnostic, so it doesn't matter whether you're using Procore or Deltek or Aconex or Autodesk, whatever. It
So
can
what's the
fit.
impacts of it? What's the impacts of this? Just to my
So
understanding.
I don't know, like I kind of look at that situation and I think, well, you imagine so whoever owns the data layer wins, basically, wins the
Okay.
entire game. So
Yes.
if you're sitting as Procore and you've got all these millions of customers globally, and all your customers are starting to feed in all this information about how they manage their projects, everything, all their information, you're actually building up a whole bank of intelligence on project execution.
That's powerful.
It's extremely powerful, and this is something I need to look into further. And this is why it's so important for companies to be interrogating these companies around privacy. Who owns the data? If they stop using the tool, what happens to their
What
data?
happens to that data? Yeah.
Is it retained? Is it destroyed? What happens? Or is it already all in the mix there?
Mm.
So you could, in theory, if you were Procore, now I don't know what the company's kind of longer term strategy is, but if I was a construction company and I was using the technology, or I was availing of that, they're going to build up such knowledge that, what does a construction company do? It manages finance, people, and risk. And someone said to me, "Oh, like the client's not going to want to take on the risk for projects." So you could say, well, the client could run Procore and just coordinate all the subcontractors, and they wouldn't need the main contractor in the middle there, because everything's going to be automatically controlled by the platform at the top. So someone brought up with me, oh, but the client won't want to own the risk. The point is that there's so much intelligence to the nth degree that it de-risks the process nearly entirely. So if you were a construction contractor and you're building offices and, I don't know, hotels or whatever it might be, do you have to accept that a lot of the knowledge and methodology around that is going to be commoditized? And will you just have to accept that? And is it the companies who are contractors but maybe have a development arm who can move their value generation upstream? Would you have to look at particular areas of specialisation and become a real specialist in a niche? And maybe ring fence that information if you've got proprietary methodologies for a particular sector? Maybe do you kind of hide that off and build your own bespoke AI tool for that?
It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it? And it
It
kind
is.
of makes me realise, I think that the number one fear that, like in surveying, is using AI tools is data, is the risk of that. Where is that data going? Who's using it? Who has access to it? And the ownership. And I do think so that to me is a huge concern. And we know people are using it blindly. Even just the simple things like employees could be just accessing your company data.
Exactly.
Putting it in an open model and, on confidential data. And I think there's so many things that are happening and so many variables, and it's extremely disruptive when you bring those big examples in that just says we're taking this seriously. And if the big players are taking it seriously, then, the smaller players are just going to be sort of moved out if they don't adapt.
I think I set up Google alerts for any kind of mergers and acquisitions news around all those big construction platforms and construction software companies, and also a lot of the big practices on tier ones, to just see, because that will inevitably shape the market for everybody else. That's what's changing the dynamics of the market that we're operating in. So when you start to get your head around how even those two acquisitions are shaping the market, and there will be more and more of that in the next, I would say 2026, you're going to see a lot of that. But that's not to say that as a smaller company, you couldn't take proprietary knowledge, build your own tools, and sell it to others in the sector.
You've got to adapt, haven't you? You've got to
You do.
adapt.
Yeah.
Because it's changing fast. And sadly, you can't just sit there and go, it doesn't affect me now. I don't want to use it. Like everyone else will be eventually. And if you don't adapt quickly, and I think you're right. I think that whole, you said earlier about 23, 24 to last year, people were dabbling. But I think we're now at that critical stage. Everything just seems to have ramped up everywhere across all professions, with it being adopted at a high level, like the NHS. You've got these big organizations that are literally taking it seriously. So as a small business or a medium size, you can't afford to just ignore it. And it's hard because people are scared, I think. I think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of bury your head in the sand. I don't know if you see that, but I think there's better to ignore it, feel more comfortable, but I think we can't. One of the things you've mentioned briefly before was something around a community that you're looking to launch. I'd like to understand a bit more about that.
It's quite an exciting development. I mean, it shows actually how even your own business model evolves with all of this, because at the start, Just doing a lot of training courses and taster sessions and one-day master classes for companies. And there's still a lot of activity going on. But in a way, you get to a point then and you're presented to the board or the senior team and everybody gets it and now they understand why strategy is so important. And it's like, yeah, but so what do we do next? So I'm actually building a community platform stroke knowledge hub. So rather than everybody paying for consultancy on a separate basis, this is the process of implementing AI and getting your strategy right and being aware of all those other facets that are involved. It's a long-term process, you know. This is a process that every company's going to be working through for the next
It's ongoing,
3 years.
isn't it? It's
Yes.
ongoing. It's not just like we'll do this little exercise, off we go.
So it's how do you make that affordable for SMEs or mid-sized companies on an ongoing basis? So this platform is it's designed so it's going to be a subscription basis. Companies can use it really instead of consultancy for action of the cost.
Right, because consultancy is quite prohibitive for a lot of businesses, isn't it?
It is. So I suppose this democratizes the whole process for them. So you can buy a subscription to the platform. You can dip in and out of the content. There will be recorded content on there. There will be online live training on different elements of AI implementation. There will be subject matter experts, people who can really deep dive into things like cybersecurity and compliance and governance. And so it's really like a hand-holding platform. We're going to have also then demos from the software vendors on there and people talking about the different AI tools and technologies. There will be live Q&A so that sometimes you get so far with something and then you have a bit of a dilemma and you think, I need some advice on this. So you can actually bring that to the community forum and get assistance from an expert on it. So it's really a ring-fenced forum for knowledge and for learning and also peer learning. I'm taking about 10 construction companies through an AI implementation and strategy process at the minute. And we find that, get everybody in the room and everybody has different experiences and there's a lot of peer learning as well.
Yes.
And the more and more social media goes down the route of all this AI generated content and nonsense, the more people want to speak to other people in their industry and they don't want to be dependent on an algorithm for visibility. They want to go on there, they want to post something and they want to get interaction and talk to other people in their industry. So there'll be a whole forum on there for people to post and discuss with other people in the industry. So I think that's really missing from the whole conversation around AI
and this is
construction.
specifically, so what's your specific sort of ideal member? Where are they coming from for this community?
So it could be construction contractors or subcontractors or consultants that are in that space as well. So yeah, it's just but really focused only on AI in construction.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a fantastic resource. And so that launches, is that next month?
Yes, that will be launching towards the tail end of next month. Constructive Intelligence is the platform.
Excellent. Well, what we'll do is in the show notes, I'll include, as you mentioned earlier, your LinkedIn. And so that if people want to get in touch with you and ask about that or anything we've talked about today. Absolutely. And obviously, we're kind of coming close to ending the conversation, but we didn't talk much about your keynote speaking, but also it's just brilliant. But if anyone wants to talk to you about that or anything to do with consultancy for firms, I think what I've always liked about you, Suzanne, and the conversations we've had is that you've always come at this from the bigger picture angle and seeing through so much noise. You have this concrete experience and knowledge in construction. You've seen this huge disruptive change coming, educated yourself, get yourself skilled up, and then now you're assisting these companies in such a disruptive environment, and there's so much uncertainty going on. There's a lot of competition and a lot of change. And I think it's always good because you give that common sense approach and that literally, let's just step back a minute. Let's not get carried away with it all. And let's just look at this from actually, things are going to change outside your business in the next few years.
Yeah.
It's not just, I need to work faster. And I think that's really important. And many surveying firms will need to understand that as well. That I've said these things before, but I think your expertise and knowledge is something that I think if anyone's listening and is in with the construction space, I highly recommend Suzanne. And is there anything else you want to add before we kind of finish off for today?
I suppose I think you're right that I try to keep things simple. I try to, and I think because AI is such a vast subject, it's even more important to cut out a lot of that noise and nonsense that goes on around the edges, because it just ends up confusing people. So yeah, I suppose that is my approach, just clear, direct, getting people to think about the right things.
Practical. Yeah.
Yes, and simplifying it down and using analogies. I like a lot of stories and analogies to just think about it, to give people a framework to organize the information in their own head.
I've already taken the car one because that to me is genius. I like that one a lot. I was just seeing diagrams, I was seeing drawings of this car and the cartoon. My mind went off somewhere when you mentioned the car thing. That was brilliant. But I've been looking forward to this session, Suzanne, and I've really enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of things that a lot of the listeners are going to give them some food for thought, because not enough people talk about AI at the strategic level, certainly not across construction. It's not something that I see much of. I see tools, everyone sees the tools, but actually addressing and looking at things from a future, also looking ahead and not just now and reacting, and be more proactive and planning for what is inevitable and the change that's coming.
Well, thanks very much. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, and I love our conversations around AI. They usually go off in many tangents, so it's always educational.
Yeah, it's been really good.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.